This is our second section for the legislative branch. We will have one more. The two main things we will be covering in here will be gerrymandering and then committees. Two definitely big things that you will have for AP exams. We covered gerrymandering before, but I come back to it because it's intertwined in so many different things. And then for committees, this is obviously one of the most important things in the bill law process, and we're going to come back where we had before. We're now going to focus on it that we have. For the third time this year, there are several things you have to know, and this is where, when it comes to the legislative branch, where we have apportionment, reapportionment, and then what is redistricting, even though it's not on this page, and where the redistricting is done by the states. Many times it's political, and this is where it comes in for the gerrymandering. I'm not able to update this map yet, but soon I will be able to. But the trend from 2020 census will be much like what has happened since World War II, where the trend is the population moving from the Rust Belt to the Sun Belt. So we know right now that Texas is probably going to gain 3 seats. Florida's going to gain 1 or 2 there. Meanwhile, Ohio, Michigan, Pennsylvania, West Virginia, Minnesota are all states that are probably going to lose seats as we have reapportionment. And then each state has to do their own redistricting. So even if they keep the same number of seats, the population within the state may have changed enough, and that's where they have to redraw the maps. Now, in this redrawing of the maps, this is where gerrymandering comes about. The first image you see there is the old political cartoon named after when Senator Representative Jerry had the map that was drawn in his favor, and they made it to look like a dragon. But gerrymandering is when you have it where one group is over another. Some ways you can see, if you see tentacles like this or something that's just an odd shape, you know that that's gerrymandering. Here we have down in South Florida and Broward County, where Republicans are strongest along the coast there, and then also then on the outside of I-95 there. So they connected those areas together. Broward County is a heavily Democratic county, but they are able to draw a district to pack in Republicans in that area. All right, how to limit it. First thing that was done was the Voting Rights Act in 1965. And the purpose of this is to make sure that we have the cracking and the packing, that you don't do something to dilute gerrymandering in there. A lot of this was taken away, though, with the Shelby case in 2013, which we were going to, at the end of the year, come back and really look at this on this case. What states had to have was what's called pre-clearance, and if those states that had a history of discriminating against African Americans or other minorities, they had to have any voting laws looked at. Well, that changed after that time period. It does affect gerrymandering some, but there were other aspects that it really made a difference here. The other case that you have, you cannot gerrymander to help a certain group. So here's where the idea that we have, you can't hinder a group or you can't help a group for a minority for this. The district that you see on the right here, which you see all of that in green, that was actually a district in which the Republicans drew, but it actually helped out for Democrats, and that's why Democrats looked the other way. It connected to areas that were heavily Democrat, especially African American. A lot of the black neighborhoods of Jacksonville, then it went along the St. Johns River, went into East Palatka. A lot of the biggest chunk of area land-wise is the Ocala National Forest, and very few people. It did the east side of Gainesville, not the west side there, and then more of the forest, and then it came down and it hit black neighborhoods in Orlando like Pine Hills, Eatonville, and areas like that. The courts overthrew that and said that you cannot have it. Now, Republicans did this to kind of satisfy Democrats, as they had drawn down in Miami several districts that were very Cuban oriented that would vote for it. But Miller versus Johnson and other Supreme Court cases, you cannot make a district to support a certain minority, even though if the intent is good. Again, you can't hinder or support in here. Why would a party use gerrymandering? This comes because if you're in power, you want to keep power. And how is packing and cracking used? This is where we talked before of this, but kind of using the diagrams, you see where you can go, and you can take a group of people and maybe you pack them all together, so you might give up one district but gain others, or you crack up a group like a pie that you have in here. So sometimes it's been obvious. I have North Carolina on there after the 2010 census. North Carolina was so obvious. They even on North Carolina A&T University split that historically black university in half in their cracking of it. Here I had a whole series of maps when we did gerrymandering early on, and this is where for the United States we actually, according to this, only have about 72 truly competitive districts. The rest of them are usually going to be blue or red. That doesn't mean they were gerrymandered. Like where we're at in Citrus County, whichever direction we go to and you connect us to, we're going to be Republican there. So no matter what, we would be those like on the far right for red. The same thing's true for some areas in the cities that you have that will always be blue in there. So you can't make them competitive. But we have a lot of areas that are that way. All right, I have this, and this is from the first unit, but come back into ideas where, and I can see that in a lot of the writing for the College Board, that even though we don't do comparative government, this is where the idea of the single member districts comes in, and where we have single member districts, where the opposite of that is at-large districts, where we are voting for individual candidates. What happened for our district? Daniel Webster ran against Dana Cottrell, so a Republican versus a Democrat. If you're a third party, you know you pretty much have no chance. And so whoever has the most votes, so plurality, so you have one more vote in second place, you win the district there. The idea of a multi-member district is the idea that, let's say we had, where our area would be the blue area on the top of Florida, if we had 5 districts, and if the Green Party got 21% of the vote, they would end up getting one of those seats. Where for a single member district, if the Green Party candidate got 21% of the vote, they get 0 there. This again helps out the two-party system, and it'll also encourage gerrymandering to make sure that you are able to have that. All right, for our next topic is committees. Most of the work is done through committees. Committees are extremely important. This is where, if you remember the bill to law, Schoolhouse Rock, this is where Bill thinks he's gonna die. There are 4 general type of committees that we have. You should already know conference committee, the last one's on there, and that's where when the House and the Senate have to agree on a bill together. Standing committees is what we'll spend the most time on. These are permanent committees on certain subject matter. Joint committees are temporary committees, usually for oversight and procedural type things. Select committees are temporary committees for something that won't fit into a standing committees. Again, standing committees are permanent. The proportion of the people in that committee will be whatever the proportion is. So if the House is 53% Democrat, 47% Republican, then you would make it where it is Democratic control by a small amount. Right now, like our Senate would be, every Senate committee currently has one more Republican than Democrat. Inside the House, you have a lot of subcommittees. These are where you break it down even more. So you might have, instead of just the Committee of Agriculture, you'll have a committee for forestry, one for fisheries, things like that. Select committees are temporary ones if they don't fit in it. Sometimes this is done for basically, I would say, a dog and pony show, like in the early 2000s when we had the steroids in baseball. Sometimes it's an issue like Benghazi, or probably the most famous is the Watergate, when they're investigating that. But it's a temporary committee that doesn't fit under it. Joint committees, you have both the House and the Senate. Joint committees are permanent, and here they are over, again, a lot of oversight that's done, and over some certain issues, a lot of it procedural that you have. Conference committees, or the conferences, when you have a bill of law, you'll have, it's a temporary one where you have people from both the House and the Senate come together to try to make the bill the same. All right, in your writing, usually you'll be able to write in there, you don't have to know the exact name of a committee in there. You would just write the committee dealing with agriculture, the committee dealing with education, the committee dealing with the military there. So even if you don't have the name exactly right, like the military is armed services, and there, that doesn't matter. There are a few committees that you must know in here, and these first couple are these must know ones that you have. The first one is the Rules Committee. It is only in the House of Representatives. This is the gatekeeper. Every law goes through the Rules Committee. They determine the, guess what, rules. Now again, this is only in the House. Even though the chairperson is not the Speaker of the House, the Speaker is pretty much the one controlling what's going to happen. They will determine whether there can be amendments added, whether there can be discussion on the floor, what can be done with this. And there's a closed rule, open rule, gag rules are all things that can be added in the Rules Committee. The second committee is the second one that's only in the House, the House Ways and Means Committee. All taxing legislation has to start in this committee. Remember that if it is revenue, it must start in the House. So, trade agreements, Social Security, taxes, even fees. If you're going to increase the fee to a national park, it has to go first to the House Ways and Means Committee. The House does most of the work on things. The Senate will look at it through usually the Finance Committee. But this is where the House Ways and Means, when you see it, you know it's where taxes start. Appropriations, both the House and the Senate has Appropriation Committee. When you see appropriations, you need to think the word spending. So both the House and the Senate have it. Remember, to build laws, we have the authorization bill, then we have the appropriations bill. So this is where the appropriation bills come from. What are you going to spend on? And it can be a pork barrel project. So if we do have a moped museum, however money is going to be spent on it is sent through this, and this is where they make the appropriation bills, or where, watching Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, they call it a deficiency bill there. But all the legislation spending goes through there. Both the Ways and the Means and Appropriations Committees are very powerful committees, because when you're dealing with money, that is very powerful. Rules Committee is very powerful too. And here, Armed Services is with the military, that's pretty obvious. The Foreign Relations Committees are dealing with trade, diplomatic. In the Senate, this is even more important, because the Secretary of State, this is where the confirmation hearings are done, and then for anything for the ambassadors, and then again, they will look at any treaties in this case in there. Judiciary Committees are very important committees, both in the House and the Senate. In the House, this is where they're going to look at immigration, they're going to look at amendments, civil liberties, and this is where one of the only other powers the House has is to have the impeachment charges. This is where the committee will look at that. Also extremely important in the Senate, usually the biggest thing you look at is the confirmation of Supreme Court justices and all federal judges there. It oversees the Justice Department, has oversight over that, which is the FBI, the ATF, DEA, all of those different things there. Now, I keep using this word oversight. When you see oversight, what this is and every committee has their own little oversight, but this is where they overlook the bureaucracies and make sure that they are doing what they're supposed to. Bureaucracies implement the laws. So Congress will write a law, but then the bureaucracy will then go and have to implement it. So I like to use the example of the Department of Agriculture. They write a law, then the Agricultural Committee writes a law. The Department of Agriculture will then implement it there, and then the Agricultural Committees will look and see, are they doing what they want? This is where they're a watchdog. That's part of the iron triangles that we're going to come through in the House for the subcommittees that we'll have very soon. All right, the leadership of committees, we're going to come back to this in the next section a little bit more, but chair people are extremely, extremely powerful there. They will be from whatever's the majority party. There, they decide the calendar. They are the ones that can decide that a bill's going to die. So, bill can be killed simply by the chairperson if they're never going to listen. A lot of that's done on purpose that they have. Traditionally, it was by seniority. The longer you were a senator or representative, that's where you have. It's still, seniority is important, but it's not the number one thing in some cases here. A lot of it is party loyalty. You might be for a long time a senator, but if you have not been loyal to the party, you may not be there. The committee assignments. In the Senate, they have a steering committee, and the steering committee is also what makes the calendar, which decides. So this is a powerful committee in the Senate that decides, and you're going to see that in Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, that Saunders is going to mention the steering committee, and the steering committee, or they will even listen to what your bill is. All right, another word you need to know is caucuses. Caucuses, and you might think, we already had this. Well, this is where the primaries, that's a different type of caucus. These are legislative caucuses. Now, caucuses are groups. in here. They can be party-based or they may not be in there. They may also have caucuses that you have that are both Senate and representatives. The thing about it is they have a same interest. Sometimes they are regional, sometimes they are ethnic, they are specialized interests. Example I'll give here for Florida is the Everglades Caucus. Doesn't matter if you're Republican or Democrat. If you're an area that has with the Everglades, you will determine. But even not just the Everglades. There's people in the Everglades Caucus that could be from Louisiana or Texas or Mississippi that live in the bayou areas. So the Everglades, some of the things they're discussing will also affect that area. Where we're at, we're not in the watershed for the Everglades, but we have a lot of rivers and things. So you might be a representative with our springs and rivers that you look at some of the same things that you have. The Black Caucus, Women's Caucus, that you have specialized interests, like a Still Caucus that you have. All right, some overall questions that you kind of look at that can be questions that you have on AP exams in here. Why are committees considered a true source of power in Congress by many? In here, well, go back to Schoolhouse Rock. Okay, Bill hopes he's not going to die when he goes to committee. This is where most bills go to die. And they can be changed, all the amendments, all the things that can be done in there. So that's where so many things aren't done in here. Why are committee chairs so powerful? Went a little bit over that. They set the calendar. They determine what's going to happen, who's going to talk, what's going to be seen. A committee chair can kill a bill. What is meant by getting on the right committee? There's a couple of different ways you can. If you're cynical about it, you could say, well, you're just going to get on a powerful committee to try to make sure that you get where there's big lobbyists and you want to make it where you have a lot of power there. And that's one way for a right committee. But usually when it says for the right committee, what's right for your constituents. If you live in Iowa, it does you no good to be on the fisheries committee. So if we think like in our district that we live, for Daniel Webster, all right, what would be the right committees for him to be on? Well, our biggest thing we have here is old people. We got a lot of retirees. So if you're on a committee like the Ways and Means Committee that deals with Social Security, so something with Social Security, Medicare, Veterans Affairs, those are the right committees for this area that you would have in here. All right, how do standing committees fit into the idea of iron triangles? So yes, here we go. We're going back into iron triangles. We mainly have focused on interest groups before, but now we have our iron triangles. We had interest groups before. Later on, we're having bureaucratic agencies. Now we're focusing on the committees and subcommittees and Congress in here. So when you think of iron triangles, I told you with interest groups, you need to think of the word always information. Whatever you're writing about with them, the interest groups are going to have information, whether they're talking to the committees or the bureaucratic agencies. Now, for our subcommittees and committees, the word you're going to always end up writing about in here is going to be oversight. In there, they're going to look over and then they're going to have hearings. So there's two different things you're going to write about with them. Our committees are going to have hearings. So the Agricultural Committee wants to write a law about having what is going to be allowed for a new type of pesticide. So they have this pesticide, they come in, they're going to have hearings. Where the interest groups come in, the interest groups are going to come in and they're going to tell and give information on what they think should be done. So we go back to our past Phil quiz on interest groups. You think back, what are some ones that we had? Okay, the Grange, the Farm Bureau. So they're going to come in and say, we need this insecticide to help out farmers. But also think what's on the other side. The Sierra Club may come in and say, we can't have this insecticide because it's going to kill these insects that are part of the food chain and eventually it will hurt because of this. So those interest groups in these hearings are given information to the legislators. Meanwhile, the bureaucracy that will have, the Department of Agriculture will have to eventually implement whatever law that the Congress passes that started through this committee. So Congress is going to have oversight. They're going to watch and see, are you doing it the way you want? And if they don't do it the way they want, Congress has certain ways to make sure that they do then start doing it the way they want. Simple way they have is simply with a hearing. So they bring in a hearing and say, why are you doing this? I know I showed an example in class of Elizabeth Warren with some of the people from the banking that you have. Another way that they have here, and this is in one of our questions a little bit later on in here, but through money. Congress sets the budget. If the Department of Agriculture is not doing it the way that the committee wanted, they will end up cutting their budget. Or they are doing things right, they might give them more money for things in here. So, you see this thing. Now, another thing that you have in here, and this is where our interest groups get intertangled with our committees. So you're a committee that's dealing with something and you're dealing a lot with these interest groups. What about when those interest groups have PACs and other things that contribute to campaigns? And here's where it could be an unofficial perk of office. A perk is kind of like a extra thing or benefit that you have. So they could get this. Now, this is also something we have a little bit later on, but this is where a lot of times people think, and again, very cynical, that we pretty much have a bunch of bribes. All right, you vote this way, I'll give you a bunch of money. But it's not really as bad as you might think it is. In fact, it's not that bad at all. Usually the support that you give are to those that are already supporting you, that you have on here. So, all right, for our iron track, what congressmen do interest groups financially support the most? That's what I was just talking about. It's going to be the ones that vote their way the most often. If you're a person that always votes against gun laws that you have there, and so you're a person that supports the ideas of the NRA is going to support you the most. But if you're a person that doesn't, the NRA is not going to give you money and then hope that you change your votes. They're going to go and try to get people during the campaigning to run against you. Now, there are those that sometimes vote one way or another that, yeah, they might try to influence them, hoping that they'll get more support in the future that they have. But it's not like you think that, oh, here's a person that always voted against anything for guns. Now they're getting a campaign donation, and there I almost said bribe, but it's unofficial bribe in that way. And suddenly they change their vote. That's too obvious. That doesn't happen too often. How can a member of Congress make life uncomfortable for lobbyists? Here's where you saw in the hearings the things with Elizabeth Warren. You can just hammer them in a hearing. In there. You can expose them if they are trying to do something that's illegal, like a bribe. How do they make bureaucratic agency behave? That's where it comes back to the budget and, again, oversight hearings. So iron triangles, again, we've only covered two sides of them. It's nothing exciting, but it's pretty easy. Again, you have to think on each issue. What are the interest groups involved? What are the committees involved? Later on, we will have what bureaucratic agency. And how are they with each other? And again, remember, information, hearings, oversights will all be in your writings that you have. You will notice that right here, a question that has a whole lot to do. You see reapportionment, redistricting, gerrymandering there. Even the court cases, what are two limits that you have on this?